Just talk about your background in Sioux City and Woodbury County, what you've done, how long you've lived here, just the background of being in the area here.
Well, I grew up in Sergeant Bluff. Was born in Des Moines, but I grew up in Sergeant Bluff in Sioux City. When I was in high school, I participated in volunteering at the soup kitchen. When I was in college, I was on the Dean's Honor Roll for Social Responsibility at Creighton University for environmental river cleansing. I was also awarded a position on the Dean's Honor Roll in general for my academic performance and also for being involved in inter-residence hall government. I went on to grad school at Creighton University to get my master's in business administration, and I decided to broaden my horizons a little by traveling, studying abroad in Beijing. I studied economics in China, and I've done quite a lot of traveling, whether it's volunteering activities. I've helped my father. He's a physician in Sioux City. He's a podiatrist, so we've done diabetes workshops, informational things with humanitarian efforts, anywhere from Alaska to Australia to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I went to go be with the Havasupai tribe. There was an interesting moment in that experience for me when we were going to a diabetes workshop, and before our helicopter could go down to the canyon, they had to take several pallets of soft drinks, and so we were going there to tell them to stop.
Yeah.
And we couldn't physically go down until those soft drinks were delivered, and we were going there to tell them about diabetes.
It's irony
So
about ironies, right?
that kind of prefaced me for all of this running against the status quo. What I'm doing right now is what happened in my life leading up to that. Sometimes people need to hear that there are problems and they need to be corrected, and that's certainly true in county government. Now, when I came back to Sioux City, I continued my work experience in healthcare administration and quality services. I work at the Siouxline Surgery Center full time, working on quality auditing, financial projects, sometimes human resources. I've had several tasks in that role, and I've also been blessed to have written and published many articles online, on blogs, on various mediums, and the Sioux City Journal saw fit to bring me on as a columnist for the last year. So I enjoyed contributing that way and voicing constitutional conservative principles in my writing, which have been which I have seen has resonated with people. As I go and I campaign now, those principles still resonate with people. And also being in Sioux City, I volunteered through church. I always have. I think that's an important part of civic engagement. And that's actually how I met my wife. We had several trips, and a couple of them were to Honduras, humanitarian and evangelistic trips. That's where I met my wife and brought her back. We've been married over 3 years, and a lot of the time when I came back to Sioux City was spent in navigating the green card process all by myself. So I think that's that took up a lot of time. That took a lot of commitment. That took a lot of perseverance, and you don't know unless you've been through it how committed you have to be to go through the bureaucracy, those levels of necessary government, you could say, that takes some problem solving.
So is your wife from Honduras? Is that what you're saying?
My wife is a Honduran citizen.
And so you helped her through getting through the green card process. Okay. And it's very lengthy. And,
Yes.
Yeah.
It's still going on,
Okay.
but because you get a 2-year conditional permanent residency, and then you renew that into a 10-year.
Okay. And you were kind of going a little bit into this, but maybe flesh it out. When did you first become interested in public policy and politics? And again, we're talking a little bit about that, but just what was the spark there? And just talk about that.
They all kind of came together in my life. Just the civic engagement, volunteering, church involvement, all these extracurricular things that you do. You find as you write that these principles are often direct themselves to politics. And a couple of years ago, when I saw that the three Republican challengers to the board ran similar campaigns, actually, and were all three endorsed by the Sioux City Journal. And I'd like to point out those three have all independently endorsed me all the way back in the Republican primary for this seat. And what I've noticed in that for this office is that a lot of the themes were, as I said, the same. Transparency, how long the incumbents have served, how hard it is to get incumbents rotated out of office. And so that's certainly played a role in wanting to serve. And I look at campaigning for a county office as just an extension of volunteering in general, because you're running to represent a whole county. As I've gone out, I have so far personally visited and door knocked in every single rural community in Woodbury County, and I think that's extraordinary, not because I did it, but because people tell me that. When I go to these communities, people haven't seen a candidate for office, let alone a supervisor, for the whole time they've lived in their house, but perhaps they vote or they don't vote. They just want to see someone, and I think the fresh face is important. It's important to be a fresh face, especially considering the unique dynamic of long-serving members in Woodbury County, but you also need to be knowledgeable on the issues, and that's why I've been to all these communities.
Okay. And what in your background would make you a good county supervisor?
Well, I think attention to detail is very important with the county budget. It's less of a glamorous public office. It has a lot of administration to it, and so my master's in business administration will certainly help that. It's been at least a dozen years since there's been a member of the board with an MBA, and I think looking at the budget and comparing it to some city budgets even, you can notice that there is a lack in long-term economic planning. And so we need to examine other methods of budgeting, and also, as we think outside the box, think outside the current fiscal year. This is going to be extremely important when we recognize the incoming revenues from CF Industries. Taxpayers want to know that those funds will be prioritized for property tax reform, and that's in their interest. Before we speak about things in the county government interest, and before we think about or talk about projects or anything like that, we need to respond to the citizens that have noticed that their last property tax increase was the biggest in 5 years.
Okay. Anything else in your background that you want to mention?
I just think the strong educational background and the commitment to being transparent about my personal political views and being able to communicate that through writing and communicate that through activism over the last few years. Being involved in Sioux City's Effective Fiscal and Public Policy Committee while I was working full-time and while I was navigating the permanent residency process for my wife, I did decide to take up another a use of my time and joined that and was elected chairman. So I've been fortunate to learn several unique city issues that I think.
What's the name of that committee again? I'm sorry.
Effective Fiscal and Public Policy Committee.
Okay, sorry. Okay, and you started to go in this direction too with what you said, but what are the chief issues, say 2 or 3, facing the county today?
The chief issue right now is to restore trust in county government. There's been a lot of talk of transparency, and the reason why there's talk of transparency is that, as I said before, the board is reactionary. They're not very proactive in tackling issues, whether it's the Liberty Park issue, whether it's issues brought up by the Taxpayers Research Council, whether it's transparency in general. Those issues are typically resolved after groups of citizens or outside groups or citizens, one by one, demand the board look at them. And so I'll be a supervisor that goes out into the county to see the issues myself on the first phone call, not when there is a groundswell of negativity that forces me into it. The second major issue is long-term economic planning. As I said before, with CF Industries and the subsequent income, we need to look at budget processes that span over 1 year. We need to look at how we can prioritize property tax relief for the taxpayer. We've asked a lot of them over the last few years. We are not competitive as a state with our neighboring states. Our county has extra work to do to catch up, and I think that we need to take some fresh looks at old problems.
Okay, and then as far as those issues, why would you be the best candidate for the county position? You're in District 2, is that right?
4.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
District 4.
I'll take
why are you the why are you the best one for that position?
Well, I think I've come out and I've been on the side of the taxpayer. I've been on the side of the citizens, of the residents. When courthouse security became an issue, I didn't wait to see what the polls said. I didn't wait to see what other people thought, how it should be phrased. I just said what the people wanted to hear and what the people demanded of their supervisors as far as regaining trust. The day after the supervisors decided to overrule the citizens' concerns and public safety with their courthouse security decision, I spoke out against it. And I believe the headline was that I slammed transparency. And that's true of when it happened. It seemed like you come out and you break through the status quo. Now it's almost a given. All the candidates are talking about transparency. All of them take it as a de facto a factor in what the county board needs. So I think my ability to advocate for the taxpayers is what sets me apart of any group. I think we need to be flexible as supervisors in how we provide service, whether it's changing meeting times or dates, but we need to be resolute in how we proactively protect the taxpayer, how we remain engaged and involved in negotiations that involve taxpayer money.
And go a little deeper with the transparency. 1 or 2 places where you feel like the courthouse security, but just maybe flesh that out. What wasn't transparent about the process?
Well, what wasn't transparent about the process was noticed by Republicans, Democrats, and independents. When there's an issue that the supervisors want to bring up, it shouldn't be brought up and discussed and be attempted to be voted on at the same meeting. It was after outrage that they decided to delay it. That should not be the case. There should be upfront discussion about what's coming. And with nonprofits, there should be upfront discussion of how the money is being given out. There should be citizen involvement and engagement in number 1, if that money should be given out, number 2, who it should go to, and number 3, how they should report it, and how they should demand balance sheets from those entities.
So issues shouldn't be a first time presentation then vote that day.
Right.
There should be more time in between.
Right.
Okay. Okay, and then the last question I have, do you have any impressions that you want to share about your opponent? Any thoughts on how he's done, things of that nature?
Impressions. What do you mean?
How do you summarize how he's done? You don't have to say anything about him if you don't want to, but do you have any judgments or impressions or thoughts on how he's done?
I think my opponent is right to say that we need a fresh perspective moving forward, but I would argue that I am that fresh perspective. I'll just go back to 2 years ago when the same arguments were being levied against the county board. All 3 challengers endorsed by the Journal were saying the same things I was saying, and then I said them, and then my opponent started to say them. So I think it's a judgment against the status quo of the board that we have so many candidates running for this position that offer a fresh perspective. But I think that in contrast to my opponent, I didn't study and go to school for and travel around the realm of being involved in politics. My approach has been more holistic. I've done volunteering in the community. I've been on mission trips overseas, and I think that as far as having an advocate for the taxpayers, I'm willing to stand up and break through the status quo, and I think that's what people appreciate about me.